So this is, I just jumped to the last work uh, which I made in Sheffield last month, and it's called Failed Fall. And obviously there was spring in England last month, but I installed these leaves in the winter gardens in the center of Sheffield, where only evergreen plants, tropical plants, are on display. And this winter garden is a huge public space where people come for rest, and they use it sometimes as a passage from one place to another. So they all of a sudden encountered a very strange situation, which was a shift in time and space, because nobody would have expected to see leaves inside of this structure. And it was also shifted from autumn to spring, because we collected these leaves last autumn. They were dried, X-radiated, I have to admit, and they stored, and then we scattered them inside of this place. And it was very temporal. It was planned for only 1 week, but in the end it was a little bit shorter, because they actually broke apart, and it was not existing anymore. So it was sort of infiltrated into the whole environment.
An extraordinary thing about this work was, if you can imagine, these winter gardens, you come out from a shopping mall and walk through the gardens, so they're sort of a thoroughfare, and as you walked into the winter gardens with Roman's intervention, there was this amazing smell. So I sat in the winter gardens for about 20 minutes, half an hour, just watching people come through, and you had these incredible reactions where people would sort of automatically, just start to scuff their feet up, with the leaves, as you do in autumn, and then do this sort of double take of sort of going, but some people wouldn't even notice it, and they'd just sort of go through and be playing with the leaves, just not even kind of twig that there was something very peculiar going on. And my favourite moment was when a bride came through with her husband to have her wedding photos taken in the winter gardens, and absolutely threw a complete wobble because the whole place was covered in these autumn leaves. They started to stick to the bottom of her wedding dress. But it was quite beautiful, as that, I think that sense of a lot of the work that we're going to be looking at one day sculpture, and particularly to witness it happening yesterday, is that work can shift the status quo through the most modest of means and actually affect something sort of quite remarkable in urban space. And I think that's one of the most interesting things for me about how we might conceive of a contemporary monument, if you like, that it shifts collective thinking in some way. Would that be helpful? Yeah, if we've got time, yeah. For those of you who don't know too much about good feelings and good times, maybe Roman, would you like to say a little bit about how that work came about, and then how we staged it yesterday?
Maybe I can just explain why I was interested in artificiality of Q as a phenomenon, as a cultural phenomenon, because obviously this can also be staged by any commercial institution for any other reason, to attract visitors to enter their premises. But I was interested in the fact that the cues in my memory from the 70s were sort of kept for quite a long time, because it was a picture which was not being able to overlook in front of any shop, because there was scarcity and people are really queuing for everything. But then this disappeared, and I was interested in sort of reacting the queue from my memories. So this queue is sort of endlessly being restaged according to my memories and cues which don't exist anymore. So in that sense, this queue can also be understood in political sense as a form which can intervene into any environment, into any cultural context, and be and have sort of power of intervention into local sort of context or things which people take for granted. So in that sense, it's a sort of cell which is sort of traveling within different contexts and environments.
A very interesting thing was the way in which the queue is staged is that performers are recruited, and Roman selected about 11 people from a pool of people who applied to Q, and that involved different generations, different types of people, which was quite important to who didn't know each other as well. And then there, in some ways, what I was really fascinated about when we were briefing the performers was, in some ways, there were quite strict parameters about how to cue, that it should be as natural as possible, that it shouldn't be overtly performing, if you like. And that importantly, it should be queuing at something which would be worth queuing at, or in some ways, if you like, a doorway or a memorial, not just a queue of people in the middle of space with no sort of purpose, no obvious purpose. But then it was quite interesting to me how open you were to the performance. So you said, okay, these are the parameters, and we took a particular route, and you chose some particular sites, but then you said, okay, now it's over to you. And there was very much a sense yesterday of how they began as a sort of awkward group of people who didn't quite know each other, and ended up being this sort of community of people going, we're going here next, you know, being quite sort of, there was a sort of collective experience for them as a group of people, and that really interested me, that you then let it go, you know, that there are set parameters, and then you let it go.
We might be able to, I think we will want to explore some of the ideas around that shortly. Just at the moment, are there any questions of clarification before we move on to the next presentations?
Just clear, you just mentioned the generosity project, or I just looked that up, I just wonder what that is.
Generosity. I guess what I meant by that was that if one thinks about those projects that involve collaboration and participation, like giving something away or maybe doing something for someone, a sort of service type art practices. It was interesting to me that the Morrisons, that's when I was sort of mentioning it really, in regards to the flower truck, very explicitly said it's very important that the flowers aren't given away from the beginning, you know, in which case it would simply be a sort of a project which was generous, you know, and overtly generous, and that was it. But in a sense it was very important that it existed as something else prior to that, and that it was activated, perhaps in a similar way to how Roman sets up an idea and then lets it go. And the Morrisons kind of understood how it might travel as a project.
What if we could thank Claire and Roman for their presentations, and we'll do a little musical chairs here while we welcome Amy Howden-Chapman to give her presentation.